This channel is made possible by viewers like you. My viewers, subscribers, and patrons greatly help to keep this channel going. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for all of you. Please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any uploads. And if you'd like to go the extra mile, please check out my Patreon page. For just $1 a month, you'll get access to what I'm working on, previews of upcoming content, and even early videos, along with other tier options for those that are interested. Thank you, and now on to the video. 2022 had its fair share of titles that deserved more attention. Ghostwire Tokyo was one of those games, developed by a studio that I have come to love, and now they were trying something completely different. Plus, outside of it being available on PC as well, this would be a PS5 exclusive, at least for them. And then where Sony just seems to be interested in story-driven open games, Ghostwire does scratch that area a bit, but it does it in a unique way from its presentation, combat, and even its story. Ghostwire's open-world setup is very familiar, and honestly could have benefited from being a smaller, more dense game, but it's also charmingly weird in its execution. In many ways, this is the type of exclusive that I want to see more of, and can help to round out a console's library. Sadly, when it released, it quickly got brushed aside. With it coming to Xbox for the first time and available on Game Pass, along with new free content, Ghostwire is receiving a sort of second launch and getting a second chance at getting noticed, so let's dive in. After my first few hours, I was completely absorbed by the experience Ghostwire provided. The story starts off promising. You are possessed by a ghost and need to do battle with supernatural beings to save your sister. Visually, all of this stuff is awesome, and the narrative is a nice mixture of weird and oddly working really well. The combat is pretty fun as the sound effects sell your abilities, and I enjoyed the unique impact as your blast will leave holes in enemies when they die, and it sort of reminded me of the deaths from Tron Legacy. Combat is slower and a bit clunky than a normal first-person shooter, but you have a few different powers along with your bow to aid you. Ghostwire is unique, charmingly weird, and really fun.
Of a jackass.
Can we not do this right now? KK, we need to protect Rinko.
I know. The gameplay's on. More of them incoming.
Now let's start off with the gameplay. You have a few means of attacks and weapons to use in combat. You have access to 3 different types of energy blasts that you can launch from your hands. You start off with wind, and that is your main go-to, and then you earn water, which provides wide attacks, and fire, which is like an area of effect bomb-like blast. Each one is very useful for different situations. Both the sound effects and impact are satisfying. Your blast will leave holes in enemies, and they will grow as you hit them more, along with some of your attacks to cause enemies to trip, fall over, or get thrown back. And on top of this, you have your bow, which can be used to charge up for stronger attacks along with some throwable items, like ones that stun, damage, or even distract enemies. For defense, you can block most of their attacks, and if you get their timing down, you can parry their attacks as well. The combat here feels slower than a normal first-person shooter, more calculated and even a little clunky. You cannot just aimlessly blast away at your enemies. You need to time your shots well and not waste your ammo. After the first few hours, I found myself in situations where I really needed to consider when to fire so I wasn't in a position where I was out of ammo. As you make holes in enemies, their cores will be exposed and you can rip them right out. You can rip several out at once if many enemies are exposed at the same time, and this gives you some health back. Now, with this being an open world, there is a large area to explore. What made Ghostwire generally fun to explore was how you have 2 different planes to be in. Essentially, there's stuff to grab on the ground and on the rooftops. Shortly after the first few hours, you'll be able to grapple and be able to glide around, and this never gets old. The vertical elements adds an interesting and appreciated element to the city and its exploration. For one, as a player, you need to consider both the ground and the rooftops. The streets have a lot of personality to them, but being able to get a different perspective from high up adds something else to this, and I really like it. In a game where I thought I would only be on foot, this early shift in expectation impresses. The open world provides much of that expected additional missions, collectibles, and enemy encounters to do. Side stuff ranges from finding money, defeating enemy outposts, finding spirits, rescuing spirits, clearing infected areas, and much more. It all ranges from decent to good. The side missions I think are the real stars of the side content. They can be rather simple with minimal story or a larger focus on combat, or others are just a bit longer and they sort of feel like supernatural investigation situations. Some of these missions surprised me, and I enjoyed when the more involved ones popped up. One I really liked was in a subway with a lot of creepy imagery. Progression-wise, you'll earn experience points from defeating enemies and completing missions. As you level up, your health will increase and you earn skill points that you can choose how you want to be upgrading. Earn health from ripping out cores, creating your own grapple spots, and a lot more. On top of this, you'll find beads that provide you with buffs for your character, and this gives you some light customization in how you want your character to operate. Ghostwire does have some flaws as well, and one relates to its open world. I honestly think this game could have benefited from being a smaller yet more dense open world. At times it feels a bit bloated with the large map and activities to do. It's not that the side stuff or exploration isn't good, it's fun, but it can become tedious at times. I think having a smaller area but more buildings to explore may have been the better way to present this world. Keep the verticality so you have the fun grappling and floating, along with fleshing out some more of the structures and buildings you pass. Another thing, as a word of warning for new players, you'll probably need to adjust the aiming sensitivity. It feels off right from the start and makes you think, why is this the default setting to begin with? Thankfully there are plenty of options to make this better, and look to the Ghostwire subreddit for good examples. I had some issues with some of the bosses as well, but nothing really ruined my experience. Ghostwire always kept me hooked. When Ghostwire was originally released on the PS5, it was one of the handful of titles that caught my eye. At the launch of the console, Sackboy provided the quality of a Mario platformer, but sadly not many people played it. To Sony's credit, they did fund Returnal, which was an indie in every way but its budget. Unique in its design, very challenging, and even got better with updates. Again, another studio I think deserves more love. Now with Ghostwire, it was being made by a studio that I have come to love a lot. Prior to this, they worked on the Evil Within games, a set of survival horror titles that fall in that underrated camp. Do you notice the pattern with this studio? Evil Within 1 took inspiration from Resident Evil 4 and crafted this warped and twisted world the player needed to fight their way through. The storytelling was convoluted, but the ride was memorable along with the gameplay. Evil Within 2 was better than the first in almost every way, and oddly enough sold worse than the first game. The storytelling took a more traditional route, which meant some of the more obscure elements were toned back a bit, but this time the player was able to get emotionally invested in the journey. Performance and gameplay were greatly improved as well, so by the time we got Ghostwire, Tango Games had built up enough credit with me. At first I did wish that Ghostwire was going to be a third-person game like their prior efforts, but after playing and enjoying it, I really appreciated their new approach. They were trying something new by being in first person and in an open world setting. I do think there are areas to improve for Ghostwire, but they did a really good job with it and continue to be a studio that I look forward to, especially with what they're working on. Now most of this video was actually written and even recorded before the news that Microsoft shut down Tango Gameworks came out. This was definitely a blow that I felt because I really do love this studio, where I found myself becoming more and more detached from stuff I used to enjoy, say like many of the big Sony exclusives, mainly because they are covering games or sequels just incorporating too much modern preachy writing, and I'm getting very turned off by all of that. Ghostwire and Tango Games as a whole was one that I very much looked forward to when it came to what they were trying to accomplish. Their games had a lot of heart, weirdness, and creativity too. They provided the good kind of different, and showed that you can do different types of games very well. When Ghostwire was originally coming to Xbox, my initial thought was cool, now the game can get some more eyes on it, and maybe that will help get a sequel to it down the road. But now where we stand, we're never going to see sequels to any of Tango's games. I do hope that these developers are able to form into a new studio and keep that magic alive. There are elements to them that very much has that indie charm too. I think they all have so many great experiences to still offer to us players. I will miss Tango, and I wish all of these developers the very best. Now as it pertains back to the game, overall Ghostwire Tokyo is a title I continually find myself being drawn back to. I played it back when it originally released, really enjoyed many aspects about it, and I found a decent amount of flaws as well. The combat has some unique elements that gives the game its own personal flavor of first-person shooting. The supernatural elements and trippy visuals at times felt like some of those Evil Within elements were coming through here. The story between our two heroes brought the emotional weight to get you invested, and now 2 years later I find myself being drawn back to it again. Part of this is because of the add-on content that was added before last year, but also too, much of this is because of the pull from the game. Tango Games is special, and so is Ghostwire. I highly recommend you give this a try. Let me know your thoughts on Ghostwire down in the comments below. If you're interested in being notified of new videos, please hit the subscribe button and bell. And if you would like to support the channel and get early access to content, please check out my Patreon. All of the links will be at the end of this video and within the description. And thank you very much for watching.